This is Movie Recapped here. In this video, I will recap one of the drama movies from 2007, titled, Savage Grace. So without further ado, let's get started.
The movie begins in New York. Tony, the narrator and protagonist, is still a newborn child born to the family of Brooks Bakeland and Barbara Daly. His father enjoys adventure. He goes on trips and writes for leisure, while his mother can be said to be a social butterfly. She is socially active and enjoys parties and meeting with reputable people. At the same time, he is the joy in their faces. That night, Barbara plans a hangout and calls her guest. As she finishes her call, Brooks asks her if it's compulsory that he also attends the party and asks why he should put on a monkey suit just because he wants to attend dinner. She suggests that he wears his war outfit. However, that suggestion isn't fine with Brooks, who reminds her the war is over. She insists that he fought and won the war, so he has the right to wear the cloth anytime he deems them fit. That evening, the nanny arrives, and they leave for the party. During the party, Barbara keeps making Brooks talk about his adventures even though he tries to avoid the conversation. He eventually has the conversation and tells them about where he has visited. As they talk, another guest on the table discusses her hatred for a cigarette, and the conversation shifts to whether or not she will smoke for a sum of money. She switches to if she will eat flesh for millions of dollars and replies in negation. Later, Barbara asks Brooks if he will follow the first girl he meets at a club. At first, he tries to prove that her question is stupid. But she keeps asking for an answer, so he replies affirmatively. As a result of his answer, when the dinner finishes, she leaves the restaurant before him and waves down an oncoming car, telling him since he will go out with the first person he meets in a club, she is also going with the first person she meets. He tries to convince her that it's just a reply, but she refuses to hear and enters the car. He returns home alone to the nanny, who is now sleeping. He wakes her up, and she asks him if they met the prince at their dinner, as that's what Barbara told her. He laughs and tells her they weren't meeting the prince, and Barbara will always say whatever she feels like. The following day, he wakes up to meet Barbara inside the house. Tony comments that his father always says he dedicated his life to making his mother his missus and also himself her husband. In Paris in 1959, Tony is now older. He goes out for an ice cream breakfast before returning home to give his mother a meal on her bed for her hangover. Meanwhile, Brooks is having a fencing game with a colleague. On the bed, Barbara tells Tony about a baseball game before they go for a walk. While they walk towards a park, Tony asks Barbara what he is meant to say whenever his friends ask about his father's profession. She replies that they have generational money, so they do not have to work, and his father is an adventurer and a writer, while she also works on her way. After the fencing game, Brooks tells his friend about their family and how his grandfather supplied all war weapons during the war and forged weapons from anything, thereby providing their family with riches that can't be quantified. On the other hand, Barbara asks Tony what his friend's father does, and Tony replies that he works. She replies that she also works, and her parents work too. However, her mother, Nini, was more interested in her marriage as getting married to riches is riches in itself. They return home, and they receive a visitor from some French writers. Barbara engages them in conversation. She talks about the writer's French book and how she isn't that great at French, but Tony is. She calls Tony out, and Tony speaks French. She gives Tony the book and asks him to read it, but the female visitor suggests that Tony would prefer to sleep. She gets angry, saying that the French think they can suggest how a woman trains her child and look at her from behind. As the visitors leave, Brooks angrily leaves the house and tells her to wish their son good night on his behalf. He goes to a bar to drink, then returns to his room, where Barbara comes to meet him and seduces him till they have intercourse. They return home the following day and enter their son's room. They see a boy on the bed and assume it's Tony until they hear him talking from the bathroom. They go over to him to ask who is in his room, and he says it's his friend Jake, who he called over since they both left him that night. Brooks isn't comfortable with this, but Barbara supports the idea. At Cadix in 1967, while at the beach with Jake, Tony sees a Spanish girl named Bianca. He speaks with Bianca, and they talk. Then he tells his parents about her, and they agree to meet her. During their first meetup, Brooks talks with Bianca by telling her all his war stories, and she falls for it. As the parents leave, the kids have intercourse that night. Brooks travels, and Barbara goes to the airport early to pick him up, only to see him with Bianca. She gets so angry, embarrasses him and walks away elegantly before getting home to shed tears. She goes to her son's room to tell him what she has seen, and she also sees him kissing Jake. She is comfortable with his new sexuality, so she doesn't say much, but tells them she has invited her crush, Sam, an artist, to join their dinner and the boys should come too. Sam gets to the dinner early and speaks with Barbara. Barbara gets emotionally involved with Sam, which at first doesn't go well with Tony as he walks out of the table once. Brooks no longer returns home, and he feels Brooks hates him, but Barbara tries to convince him otherwise. He also writes a letter and goes to drop it at Brooks's home. Bianca sees him dropping the letter and comes to talk with him, but he walks away before she reaches him. At home, Barbara and Sam make out. He enters after they are done, and they are sleeping naked on the bed, and he goes to sleep beside them naked too. When Barbara wakes up, she starts laughing, they join her in the laughter, and they touch each other. Unfortunately, Sam leaves. In 1968, they relocate to Paris. Barbara feels suicidal and attempts suicide one night, but fortunately, Tony returns home early and finds her before she dies. He says that since his father has left, the responsibility of caring for his mother is now his. They relocate to Paris to have a change of environment, and he thinks it's a good idea as that's where he learned to write backwards in his diary so no one will read his thought, although Barbara still succeeds in reading it. They attend a funeral where they see Brooks and Bianca. After the funeral, Barbara meets with some friends and returns to Tony at home. She goes near him and touches his lap. He refuses the offer at first, but she tells him he will enjoy it, so he allows her to unzip his trousers, and she rides him. As she finishes, he goes to the mirror and asks for his dog collar. She tells him it's not important, but he goes all around the house to find it. He finds it in a cupboard and accuses Barbara of keeping it. He also accuses her that she wrote a letter backwards after their fight in the morning, although she says she didn't do such. He stabs her, calls the police, and then orders noodles. He sits beside her and eats as the police arrive.
Hey! I hope you enjoyed the recap. Check out our channel for more videos like these. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and comment on how you found the video. See you soon.